Hey guys, Jay here and welcome to another cosplay tutorial. So in the last video, I showed you guys how to make stocking sword from panty and stocking with garter belt, and I said that this was version 1, and that the next video, which is this video, would be version 2. So we're going to be working on version 2 today. So as you can see, this is more of a katana style, where the other one is a straight blade. I don't know what that's called. There are straight bladed style katanas. I just don't know what they're called. They have an actual name. I don't know. Anyway, but you can see that this one has more of the traditional katana curve to it. It's not perfect, but it's what I could do in Inkscape for the shape of the blade there. You can fiddle with it a little bit to get a little bit better of a shape, or if you have a katana, like a real one or a prop one, then you can take that and make the outline of it and then just widen the top here. Now the top is supposed to be wider, just like it is on the other sword. So it's wider up near the top and smaller down by the base. And the same thing goes for this sword, where it's wider at the top and smaller at the base. That's really the only difference from a traditional katana. But then obviously the entire hilt basically is literally exactly the same as the last build. I just made this thinner because it actually fits in my hand better. So there's that. Anyway, that's it for the rambling. Let's get on to the tutorial. I start off by cutting the bevel off of the blade template. This is because I'm going to use this as the area where the core will go. I'll talk more about this later, but for now, just know that I'm separating the bevel from the rest of the blade. For the core, I'll be using this water valve key just like the previous build. In fact, a lot of this build will be very similar to the other one. They are the same sword, just a different shape. Anyway, I bent it by putting the handle part on the floor and used my foot to push down on it, and checked it against the template every so often until it was the right shape. And when it was good enough, I marked on the pattern where I will cut out near the tip to let it go into the blade as far as possible. Then I used a hacksaw to cut off the key part, as well as where it needed to be cut off to the right length inside the entire blade. Next, I needed to figure out how much of the center blade would need to be cut out to accommodate the metal core. I don't cut this out of the template just yet though, because I need the whole thing still intact for the 2 layers that go on either side that will cover the core. I trace out 2 blades onto some 5mm EVA foam, and then cut the section that I made on the template. This is hard to explain what it is exactly, so you'll have to just go by what you see on screen. If you don't think that you can do this and have it look good, you can always do what I normally do for swords and cut out a trench in the middle of the blade face. You can also leave the bevel on if you want, and do nearly the exact same thing as the last one was made, where the bevel is sanded into it, but I'm doing something different for that, which is why I cut it off. But doing it the other way would give you more foam to work with, and be able to find the center easier. I'm just doing it this way to experiment, since I don't want to make a whole video of just doing literally the exact same thing as the last one, just with a different pattern. So anyway, after I cut the piece off of the template, I traced that and cut all 3 pieces out. Now I used the Dremel to sand down the sections of the 2 outer pieces of foam that hide the core. This is because the core is actually thicker than the 5mm foam, so I need to remove some foam on both sides to make more room for it. This is basically the same thing I've done where I've made grooves in the outer layers to accommodate the core being thicker, it's just in a different spot. I glue all 3 layers of the blade together with contact cement, and I use 2 layers of glue on each side because the foam really likes to absorb most of it on the first layer. After putting one side on, I hot glue the core in place before putting the other side on, also hot gluing the core to that piece. For the bevel, I said I was doing something different. Again, this is more experimenting. I bought a few 14mm triangle dowels from TNT Cosplay Supply, and I wanted to use them as the cutting edge. 15mm would be better, as that's the size of the 3 layers that make up the blade, but the only ones I can find are from Blick, and they're more than double the price there. So foam can be squished a little, so you can get the 14mm triangle dowels to fit. I don't do that great of a job here, but this is my first time doing this method. But I do like the way it looks. It's a much cleaner looking bevel than when I try to sand it. I'll be doing this whenever possible now. Also, this is just glued on with contact cement. Moving on to the hilt, I start with the handle. Now this is literally near 100% exactly the same as the last video. It's 5mm foam instead of the 10mm foam I used last time for the center, and then there's a channel cut out for the core to sit in, then a layer of 5mm foam on either side to cover the core in the center layer, topped with a layer of 2mm foam with the heart details and that line at the bottom cut out to make it look like these are inset, and all glued together with contact cement. Also, I ended up not filming this, I guess, but I used the Dremel to smooth over all of the edges on the handle and the blade, as well as the crossguard, which I'll talk about next. But I also didn't film that, and I did it all at the same time. So just so you know, all of the edges where you can see the layers stacked up got sanded to be a lot smoother. And just like the handle, the crossguard was made exactly like the last video. 2 layers of 5mm foam cut out and glued together. And remember, when cutting the guard template free from the rest of the paper, to not cut the center rectangle until you can match it up with the blade's shape after you attach the bevel. That way you can center the blade and cut the hole to fit. And now I have to use 2 cans of hairspray to raise the sword up because I don't want the guard to touch the table. The weight of the sword will start to crush the foam since it's soft and can be easily bent. Then I use contact cement to glue the blade inside the center cutout, and the bottom of the blade is flush with the bottom of the guard. The blade template was made specifically to include the 10mm thickness of the guard around the bottom of it. Also, be sure to remember that the little round bump on the guard is on the same side as the blade edge. To attach the handle, I used some super glue down the inside of it and slid it on. And this didn't work very well, so I ended up using Gorilla Glue inside it instead, and put it back on, and it worked fine. Now, the base painting didn't get filmed either, but that's because it was not only raining out the entire time, but also it was super dark when I had the time to do it, so it was basically impossible to film. But it's no different than any other prop. I started with a few coats of Plastidip, and then the same gray primer that I've been using. I then did what I said you should do in the other video, and bought new, actually good, white spray paint. So here's what it looks like after that. I also went over it a little bit in white acrylic paint to help cover spots the spray had a hard time with. By the way, the gray and white paints are all matte. If they weren't, no color would really stick to them very well. For the blue stripes, I used the same Pool Blue by Apple Barrel that I used in the other sword, and used the template to gauge where to mask off with painter's tape. Then painted over it with a good 4 or 5 coats. This paint is also matte, just so it all matches in finish. While the blades and stripes were drying, I used that time to color the inset hearts and that line at the bottom, as well as the sides of the crossguard. Then I went over the whole blade using white acrylic to cover up all of the areas where the blue paint bled through or just got onto the white by accident. Then, just like the last sword, I mask off the blade and paint a border around it. This one is about 1/4 of an inch wide. The spine was also painted blue. Then I hit it all with a satin clear coat and the sword is complete. Alright, so that was how to make version 2, or the katana version, of Stocking Sword. So if you enjoyed the tutorial, go ahead and give it that thumbs up, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later.